Good morning, and welcome to Moments with Melinda. I am your host, Melinda Moulton, and today my guest is Stephen Perkins. Hi, Steve. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing well, thanks.
I want to really thank you for being on my show. I wanted to interview you for quite a while. So let me tell my viewers who you are. Stephen Perkins is the executive director of the Vermont Historical Society. He was director of development and community relations at Echo Lake and Aquarium and Science Center. He was the executive director at the Bennington Museum. And Stephen graduated from the University of Delaware with a master's in American Material Culture. About right?
That's right.
Well, listen, I just want to share with my viewers too that I just joined your board at the Vermont Historical Society, and it is just such a great honor to be in this work with you, Stephen. So thank you for including me on your board.
Well, thank you.
So to my viewers, I want to start off by encouraging you to visit the website, vermonthistory.org. I want you to stay, close to us in this interview, but I do want, and I'm going to be bringing this up because it's an extraordinary website and you should visit it. So let's start at the very beginning. Steve, I believe that you are a true, authentic Vermonter. So I want you to talk to us about your childhood and growing up in Vermont.
Oh, absolutely, Melinda. So I was born in the Northeast Kingdom. My parents were living in Canaan at the time, but shortly after my birth, we moved back to the family farm in Williston that my mother grew up on. So my grandparents also living here in the state, and we lived with my grandparents here, and so a big part of my childhood, especially as it revolved around kind of history and culture, was heavily influenced by my grandfather. So he was a retired doctor from UVM, and he took me on trips around the state to see historic sites and talk about all these great events in Vermont history. And of course, living in a house that was built in 1800, you just get this sense that history is all around us and that we live it and we breathe it, but also that it has a huge impact on our current world. So that was my childhood. And my dad was a teacher and my mom was a school nurse, and we had animals and we had a big garden. And so I probably that quintessential idea of what a Vermont childhood was, but I think it really shaped my trajectory and my career trajectory.
So how many generations of Perkins do you hail from?
Well, the Perkins side comes from Maine, so and I don't know how many generations that is. You want to talk about the Vermont side? On my grandmother's side, they came up before the American Revolution, so on Connecticut land grants up into southern Vermont, and then worked their way north.
So any relation to the Perkins and Perkins Pier?
Not related at all.
Okay,
So as far as I know.
but a physician at the University of Medical School, UVM Medical School. And so I was going to ask you what inspired you to study and pursue a career in history, but I'm assuming that is your upbringing and being immersed in all this rich history, surrounded by your grandparents and your parents. I was also going to ask you if there was someone who had a profound impact on your choice to take the road you took to where you are today, and I would assume that would be your grandfather.
My grandfather absolutely was an influence, and I had some wonderful teachers, here in the public school system in Williston. I mean, I will note, I'm sitting in the dining room of the house I grew up in, so I live back here on this old farm, here in Williston, and but I had wonderful teachers, and they really got me excited about history, especially local history. And I mean, I participated in History Day, Vermont History Day, when I was in sixth grade. And so, I mean, I think I always had a love for it, and I always had a love for what happens locally.
I think that says a lot about who you are, that you were raised in a home that also housed your grandparents.
I mean, it was wonderful. And you had that intergenerational conversation about what's going on in the world, what happened in the past, how we move forward. So it was wonderful. I know that's not something that everybody can experience, but for me, it was great.
Well, that's beautiful. It shows why you're so well adjusted, Stephen. Really surrounded by the love of family and generations of family. So let's us dive into the work of the Vermont Historical Society. But first, again, let me remind our viewers to visit vermonthistory.org. And if you are so inclined to support the work of this remarkable organization to preserve and present Vermont's rich history, please do donate. No donation is too small. You can do it right on the website and become a member. It's so well worth it. So let's talk about the organization. And I've got a bunch of questions about it, but I'm going to start, Stephen, with the elephant in the room. Trump imposed an executive order that cut funds to historical societies across the country. And the Vermont Historical Society was impacted when they pulled a $175,000 grant that helps educate 191 historical societies across the state. You said it was like getting punched in the gut. Talk to us about this recent happening to the organization into Vermont.
Yeah, and I think saying a punch in the gut is very accurate. And it's not just this project. It's not just losing $175,000. There are organizations that lost a lot more money than we did. But I think it's the statement of saying that these federal grants to cultural organizations are not important. And the grant letter said that our project was not in the interest of the United States.
Oof.
And I know it's a form letter, but that's a form letter that's sent to every museum that they've pulled money from to say to the work of museums in our country is not in the interest of the United States. That's the gut punch. And it just feels horrible because what we do is so important to how we understand ourselves, our community, our world around us, and all the diverse views that go into that.
And I mean, it was a small. I mean, 175,000 to this organization is a lot, and the work was really profound because Hannah was going out and meeting with other historical societies and helping them to deal with their with all of their work and helping them to understand how to curate and like that. Why do you think they're doing this? I mean, what's the purpose behind something like this?
Well, the stated purpose is that it's for government efficiency and that the federal government shouldn't be making, grants of this type or supporting these types of organizations and that they should be supported locally and by philanthropists rather than your tax dollars. And so, I mean, that's been a standard argument for some people for years. I disagree. I think we operate in the public good, therefore tax dollars make sense to support the work that museums do, like any charity. I
Do you think there's an effort to rewrite history by doing this?
well, I mean, if you look at the executive orders, there is an effort to influence or um, direct what history we're talking about
Hmm.
in a way that is advantageous to this administration. And that's scary. What we do should be independent. What we do as a field, whether we're museums, historians, universities, artists, this is what I think, makes our country great is we have this diversity of ideas and we have the freedom to express those ideas. And to now say it's not okay to do that, um, that's wrong because we're what's best. We're what's best about this country, and I'll say it. And I work in the industry, but I certainly believe so.
Absolutely. And by the way, I understand that in your upcoming budget, you're not relying on any federal grants.
We're not. I mean, we've written them out of the upcoming budget, knowing that they're just not going to be available. I don't foresee them being available for our types of organizations. We, as a Vermont Historical Society, we're okay. $175,000 is a big part of our budget and what we do. We operate on a shoestring here. We're not in a big state. We're not funded by the state of Vermont at a huge level. So we rely on private donations. We rely on our membership and we rely on the community to support what we do. And we've done that since 1838. So we're going to be around. We're still going to be around. We just don't have the ability to look towards those kind of transformative grants from the federal government that we've used very effectively in the past.
Well, we're going to fight so we can get all that back because it's one of the cornerstones of our country. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the oral history and subsequent book that was just released by the Vermont Historical Society on the COVID years here in Vermont. The project is called Life Became Very Blurry, edited by Garrett Graff. Talk to us about this project and how folks can get the book, which takes the oral history stories and compiles them into a comprehensive narrative of the pandemic. Talk to us about this project, Steve.
Well, interestingly enough, Melinda, this project was funded through the Institute of Museum and Library Services through a grant we received 3 years ago to do the work. And when you get these grants, they're highly competitive. They're not just formulaic. So you really have to work to get the grants. They're peer reviewed by panels throughout the country. And they looked at this application and they said, hey, the Vermont Historical Society is looking to investigate how Vermont responded to the pandemic. Now, of course, our response was different from other states. It was, we were very kind of regionalized, but we saw that our response was different. How we approached it was different. How communities came together seemed to be different from other parts of the country. And we wanted to investigate why. That was one piece. And then the other piece was we need to document what's going on in real time. People are going to be studying this in history books 100 years from now. We had a lot of press inquiries about the 1918 pandemic and what we had in our collections. We had a little bit, but not a lot. And so we said, we need to have this documented. And so fast forward to getting the grant, and we were able to hire interviewers, folklorists who would go out and interview people all over the state. And we had a committee that guided who we talked to. We tried to get the best diverse group of people to give their experiences with COVID, everything from, administration members to doctors to vaccine deniers. And we interviewed all of them. And we have hundreds of hours of oral history that is all now preserved at the Vermont Historical Society. All of that work, oral history, was then condensed and edited by Garrett Graff, who is a wonderful young author, journalist from Vermont, and we created a book. Life Became Blurry, and you can buy that from the Vermont Historical Society, directly from us from our website. You can also get it at local independent bookstores as well. And then we also took that and turned it into a podcast series, so you can listen to the actual words of the folks who experienced COVID. And so it just wrapped up in March. The book was published in the middle of March. The podcast series is coming out right now, April and May. So I encourage folks to check it out. Listen, it's hard. We all went through this pandemic, and I think some people, why are we thinking about it? But we need to collect it, and we need to talk about it now while it's fresh, so that those who are using it 100 years from now have great resources.
You're here. Bravo. Bravo. So the Vermont Historical Society was chartered by the legislature in 1838, and it is the oldest cultural heritage organization in the state. VHS is the primary research library for study of our state's history, and most of VHS's collection is searchable online at vermonthistory.org. I assume that that's pretty easy for folks to go on the website and to look at the digital collection, right?
Well, absolutely. And we're working on this. So you just go to our website and you click on the Discover tab, and you can peruse our library. You can look through some of our collections. You can look at Digital Vermont, where we're starting to digitize some of our library collections. But like any organization that is as old as we are and has been collecting for almost 200 years, we have a lot of stuff. And getting it cataloged online takes time. And so with our collection, a good chunk of it's there. I would say 95% is searchable online, the museum objects, because that's a smaller amount, only 30,000 things. The library collection, which is usually measured in feet, but we'll call it hundreds of thousands of items, is we're getting there. Probably about 75% is discoverable online. The rest you actually need to come visit. And
That
for those interested in Vermont history, Melinda, come visit us in Barre. The library is
we're
spectacular.
going to talk about that. We're moving right into the physical plant. But again, to my viewers, vermonthistory.org. You should be able to remember that in your sleep. Visit the website. Please make a donation to this organization if you can, and check it out. It's extraordinary. Now, the Vermont Historical Society believes that every person and every moment creates the history of Vermont. They provide resources, support for local history efforts, builds connections to communities, and enriches all of our experiences through the understanding of Vermont and the people. So let's move on and talk about the 250th anniversary, the All in Vermont project that's coming up on our country's independence, and how VHS is participating in this important project, Steve.
Well, we have so many things that we're doing, around the 250th, and Vermont Historical Society being kind of your lead history organization in the state. Some of the things that we do they aren't a museum or a library. In fact, half of what we do is supporting others in their exploration of the state. And those others may be local historical societies. There's 191 of them in Vermont. Almost all of them completely volunteer driven, and we support them. We provide workshops, and we provide curriculum, and we resources, and that sort of thing. And then we also support schools, teachers, and school children. And there's lots of programs we do, from Vermont History Day to curriculum development, you name it, that helps the school children in Vermont connect their local history to their state history to national and international topics. All In, which you mentioned, is another grant-funded project that we have, which is pairing those local historical societies, they're in almost every town in the state, with the schools to create a project that really is specific to that community, that we then put onto a digital map. So they could be movies, they could be websites, they could be projects, but we're going to create, and that's why we're calling it All In. Everybody's in. Every historical society is going to pair with every school to create a distinct project to celebrate 250 years of our country.
That's outstanding. Amazing. Thank you so much for that. We'll keep our viewers updated on all of that. So, Steve, talk to my viewers about the Vermont Historical Society Museum in Montpelier. And for any of my viewers who have not visited the Vermont Historical Society Museum, which is right next to the State House, it is a must. It has fabulous exhibits and a curated history. Talk to us a little bit about the museum.
Yeah, it's a lovely place. And like we talked about, we've been around since 1838, and we've been in our state capital for almost all of that time. So we had a museum in the second state house. Unfortunately, most of us who are in the know, that state house burned, and we lost a lot of our collection when it burned. But then we had another space, and so we were in the state house. We were in the building that's now the Supreme Court building, and then the space in the Pavilion Hotel, the old Pavilion Hotel, was purpose built for the Vermont Historical Society. And so in 2003, that space was completely renovated into an immersive museum experience. And I talk about that place as that's your introduction to Vermont history. If you haven't been in a while, or you're just interested in understanding what Vermont is all about, come visit that museum. And it's great for kids. There's all sorts of interactives. Like, you can go into a wigwam, you can go into the Catamount Tavern, you can send messages with a telegraphed key, and you can finish your exhibit by taking a picture of yourself in our interactive photo booth saying what your Vermont story is. Because one of the things we look at in this exhibit is, obviously, we can't tell all of Vermont's story and everyone's story in one exhibit. It's impossible. So we talk to our visitors that even exhibits are curated, and curators are people, and so that's a point of view. And so you're going to see a point of view as you go through our exhibit, but you as a visitor also have a point of view. So think about those things, and then go into our photo booth and tell us what you think. And guess what? We're going to put your picture and your ideas back on the front wall of our exhibit. So it's a great interactive way of thinking about history. And it's just a fun day. And, you can go through in a few hours and have a good time with your family.
I did that, Stephen. Rick and I did that. We went down and we took our picture and we put our thoughts. I got to tell my viewers, if you were there a few years ago, go back and take your children. Everyone needs to see this museum. It's extraordinary. Um, So now your history center um, is in Barry, and it's in the beautiful historic Spalding School building at 60 Washington Square. And again, to my viewers, visit this incredible center in the Spalding School. So talk to us about this magnificent home for VHS and what folks might find there.
Yeah, so like you said, beautiful building, a Lambert Packard designed, Richardsonian. I mean, it looks like a castle on the hill. And it was for those who live in central Vermont, it's the old Spalding High School, and that's what people still refer to it as. But we've been there since 2000, and we acquired the building in 1995 when it ceased being a school, and it's because Montpelier floods all the time. So we needed to move all of our treasures, all of these archives and everything out of that flood zone of Montpelier, and we put them on the hill in Barry, and it allowed us to expand. And we have an absolutely gorgeous library there, and our brand new research and exhibition gallery, which gets a lot of the museum objects out into the public view. So you're able to come in, and it still feels like a school, like a historic school. The library is big, huge reading rooms, stained glass windows. Talk to our librarians, and they're able to retrieve, old diaries, books, anything you want to do to research Vermont, you would do on site in that space. And then the small galleries, you can get a taste of what an exhibit would be. Say, if you haven't been to Montpelier, you can do a little bit of that in Barry. And then the research and exhibition gallery to really dive into objects and artifacts that tell Vermont's story in a much more in a deeper kind of academic way. I'd say, Melinda, if you've got some little kids and you want to go just get that introduction to Vermont history, it's the museum in Montpelier. If you're truly interested in taking a deeper dive into what it means to live in this state, work in this state, visit this state, then you would come to the History Center.
You also do have some great exhibits. I remember when you did the 60s exhibit at in Barry. I mean, you've had some incredible exhibits there as well. But what I love about it too, for me, is I love the smell. I love the sound of the rich wood. I mean, it's such a beautiful building. So I do encourage my viewers to check it out. Um, so one of the most important projects for the Vermont Historical Society is your History Day. So talk to us about the impact of this day, which obviously has been happening for a long time. If you did it when you were in sixth grade, talk about the impact on our Vermont students.
So, Vermont History Day is part of National History Day, which was a project created back in 1976 around the bicentennial. So it's been going on for a long time. And for some of your viewers who know what, say, a science fair is, think of this as like a science fair for the history kids. And it's an outlet for students to create projects or in response to a theme. Every year there's a theme. Access to history, responsibility in history. So they're pretty big themes for kids to think about. And students from fifth grade to 12th grade can participate in this. And they create exhibits, they create websites, they create documentaries, performances. I mean, it's an amazing diversity of projects. And we bring them all together. This year was at St. Michael's College. And we have over 100 judges who are community members who are really interested in history, who talk to the kids, look at their projects, and then we have awards. And the top um, winning the first and second place in each category gets to go to National History Day and represent Vermont and Washington, D.C. And we also give out all sorts of cash prizes and things for different types of exhibits. But it allows students to explore history in a way, maybe it's different than what they would normally do in the classroom. And it's also a project that meets Vermont state standards around social studies. So for teachers, it doesn't necessarily have to be something extra. It's actually something they can integrate right into their classroom work, and then the kids get to go and present it to professionals and maybe even get a trip to Washington, D.C. So it's exciting, and it gets kids thinking about history in new ways. And we had hundreds of kids, over 350 registrants this year of children. And then when they bring their parents, that's like 1,200, 1,300 people packed into, the gym for the awards ceremony.
It's an amazing event, and I've been a judge. So for my viewers who are interested in being involved in this, please visit vermonthistory.org. I want to just quickly mention, because I could talk to you forever, the Vermont History, the paperback that you publish. And it has new research on interesting topics of Vermont state and local history. And it's produced twice a year. Now, if folks become a member of Vermont Historical Society, they get a subscription to this really fabulous, I believe they do. Is that true that if they become
Absolutely.
they get a subscription? Okay,
Yeah, and
fabulous.
Melinda, it's a Vermont History Journal, and it's the only peer-reviewed journal of Vermont history.
Your review means if you write an article, your peers will review it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know that what you're reading in there has been reviewed by history professionals across our country, so that the research is good. It's sound. It's well cited. It's well edited, and we've been producing that since the late 1890s.
Whew.
Um, so the name changed in the 1950s to Vermont History Journal, but we've been producing it for over 100 years. And like you said, it's produced twice a year, 2 issues each year. It's carried in most libraries, so you can look it up. But yeah, as a member, you get that publication.
And I'll bet your grandfather had one sitting on his side table.
He had the whole set.
Set. Well, there
Yes,
you
he,
go.
he
Oh,
wanted he wanted every issue, 100 years worth of journals.
so, Stephen, talk to us a little bit about the volunteer opportunities to support the work of Vermont Historical Society. How do folks become engaged as a volunteer?
Well, go ahead and go to the About section of our website, and you can contact our staff about that. So if you live in proximity to where our locations are, we're always looking for people to come help us. And so at the museum, we're looking for folks to help out at the front desk, greeting people, welcoming them to the museum, assisting them in their visit. So that happens in Montpelier. And then in Barrie, we're always looking for volunteers to work in the library. Do you like research? Do you like helping people research Vermont topics? Or do you want to learn how to catalog archival groups, look through old documents, or work with our collections in the same way? Learning how to house collections, how to write about them, how to update their descriptions in our online catalog. Those are all things that volunteers do. And then more episodic, we're always looking for volunteers around our events, like History Day is a great example. We need hundreds of volunteers to make History Day possible, and that's one time a year. And if you live a little further away from VHS and you want to volunteer, contact us. We may have things that you could do from your own living room if it's a digital work, or go to your local historical society. Like I said, 191 of them, they all need volunteers. And we do a lot of training with local societies. So that is just as helpful as working for us as working with your local historical society.
Thank you, Stephen. So our time's about ending. I would love it if you could leave some words of wisdom, why history is so important for humanity.
Well, I always go back to the mission statement of the Vermont Historical Society, and that understanding the past builds better communities and builds stronger communities. And history is not facts. I think that's something we hear a lot, like, just talk about the facts. The facts don't, it doesn't really matter. Does it really matter, Melinda, that you know that Vermont became a state on March 4th in 1791? Why did it become a state? How did it become a state? How did that influence our thinking today as Vermonters? Why are we so involved in local control in this state? And why is that different from other states? It's related to our history and how our communities are formed. And this is so important for how we understand our neighbors and how we understand how our government works and how we come together as communities to govern ourselves. And that's what it means to live in a democracy. And you can't do it without thinking about and talking about the past in an open, honest way.
Oh, Stephen, that's beautiful. So what advice do you give our youth, your own children, on how to navigate this world we are living in and the challenges of protecting our democracy, fighting against planet destruction, and all the other heavy issues that are facing our children?
Well, when I talk to my kids, certainly, and I've got two of them, two wonderful children, and we do this when we talk to students from the Vermont Historical Society, is understand your sources, read widely. We say, be a historian, because what does a historian do? They always ask questions. They look for multiple sources, they look for multiple viewpoints. And when you do that, you become well informed. And then you start to navigate how you move forward. And I think if you are a well informed person who is widely read, that you'll be fine and that you will contribute greatly to the success of our country and our world in the future.
Well, Stephen Perkins, I got to tell you, I'm deeply honored to know you, to serve on your board, and to call you my friend. I want to thank you for all that you do and your passion. It's priceless and it's deeply important. Thank you so much for being on my show today.
You're welcome, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen. And to my viewers, I want to wish you well today. Happy spring. The crab apples are in bloom in Vermont. So have a beautiful day, and I will see you again very soon.